How's it going? Welcome back to Sunny Sheets. I'm Carson, and today I'm talking about The Lions of Al-Rassan by Gavriel K. Before I even talk about the book, anytime that I've heard about a book from a friend or a family or a booktuber, I always like to give shout outs to who introduced me to a certain book. Huge shout out to Dutch Greybeard, a fellow booktuber. I think since then I've heard a few other people mention this book, but for a while he was the only person I ever saw talk about Gavriel K as an author, and that's how I heard about this book. And the words and the review that Dutch Greybeard gave was what made me so interested in this book. So shout out to you, Dutch Greybeard. There is so much to talk about with this book. I think I haven't looked, but this is easily my most tabbed up book. I have so many moments and quotes and plot points that I saved. So I had to organize my thoughts on this one. So before I even get to talking about the plot, I do want to preface sort of the author and sort of give a context to what this book is. So Gavriel K, from my understanding in real life, he's a Canadian history professor, and he writes a lot of historical fiction novels that are based on real life countries and their histories. So this book is sort of a Spanish inspired retelling of the Reconquista in world history. You sort of have these three factions that are sort of stand-ins for Christians, for Muslims, and for Jewish people. So what is this book about? So within one of the main lands that we focus on, the lands of Al-Rassan, we have this almost power vacuum. This previous dynasty of the Caliphate has fallen, and we have King Al-Malik of Qartada, the Lion of Al-Rassan is his nickname. He wishes to strengthen his hold amongst all of the lands of Al-Rassan, because at the moment it's sort of these petty, kings amongst all of these different city-states, and King Al-Malik wants control of everything. And he does so with very savage means, very brutal, savage methods to try to do so. And in particular, towards basically the beginning of the book, we have this inciting incident that changes the relationship between the king and one of his main advisors and poets, Amar ibn Khairan. So this sort of inciting incident drives the plot forward based on their relationship falling apart. And then separately, in the north, we have the Jaddite kingdom. Well, specifically, it was formerly this whole country of Esperania, and it's broken into three separate Jaddite kingdoms. But specifically within Valledo, we have this very renowned figure, Rodrigo Belmonte, and he is exiled, and he makes his way down south into the lands of Al-Rassan. The fates of these two men, and also a Kendath physician named Jahane, they all become intertwined somehow with one another, and that pushes the plot forward. So for the spoiler-free section, I have really two highlights, two things to talk about this book. This book is so emotional and romantic. And I don't mean romantic necessarily in in a sexual way. I mean just the way that things are talked about, the love for one another, whether it's your significant other or your camaraderie or your country or your religion or for a past time. There is a strong theme of lamenting the darker side of humanity, lamenting radical piety and savagery and the need for power. And just going along the theme of emotions, there's just savagery in this book. There is a lot of awful stuff that happens to really good people, and it's very emotional. This actually, I don't shed tears very often in my life at all, but this was my second tear. This was the second tear I've shed, the first one being from the Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wong. So my second spoiler-free point on this book is it's just poetic. The entire writing style of this book is poetic. Like, just to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about. This is page 18. It's very, very quickly into the story. All this paragraph is saying, all it's trying to really say is something could be good or bad. And it says, better or worse? No man or woman could answer that. The winds blew, bringing rain, yes, but sometimes also sweeping away the low, obscuring clouds to allow the flourishes of sunrise or sunset seen from a high place. Or those bright, hard, clear nights when the blue moon and the white seemed to ride like queens across a sky strewn with stars in glittering array. Just to say, an event could have been good or bad. So going along I'm going to be quoting the book often. Going along the theme of the poetic writing style is I loved that these fictionalized religions embody a celestial body. The Jadites worship the sun, the Asherites worship the stars, and then the Kendath worship the twin moons. And it leads to such witty, crafty, beautiful scenes. Like, there is a scene early on in the book where something bad is happening and a town is on fire, and it says, the crackle and crash of the fires was all around them. The light was lurid, unholy, dimming the stars and even the moon. It's like this literal dimming of the sky, because, a brightness is going to make the darker sky harder to see, but it's like an undertone of these actions being unholy and dimming the light from the upper deities. So there's just, it's beautiful. Just beautiful, really crafty, gorgeous writing throughout the whole book. And then for the plot, obviously I'm not going to tell you about the plot in this section of the video, but I found it really unpredictable. There's a lot of books I read where I'm like, I know where this roughly is going to go, and it usually does somewhat, but this book were moments where I was like, I have a feeling that so-and-so is going to happen and it's going to lead to here, and I'm completely wrong, and the story goes that way. So if you I don't know. I'm not sure if everyone had that experience, but I found it really unpredictable. And then also with the plot, there's maybe not the plot, but the structure of the writing. There's so many bait and switches, so many drops of some crazy sentence being like, the character thought she was safe, but then she wasn't. And then different POV for another 30 pages. And it just adds this tension throughout the whole book. You're constantly on your feet with these bait and switches that GGK does in the writing. And then there was just so many badass moments and bits of dialogue and characters that were very also badass and realistic and grounded. In the spoiler section, I think half of the spoiler section is just going to be me talking about moments I loved from the book. So if you want spoilers, I'll talk more there. If you can't tell by the way I have spoken so far in the video, this book was incredible for me. It has such high emotions, beautiful imagery, beautiful poetic writing, and emotional beats between the characters and a longing for what could be and what was. And I just found it very powerful book, extremely memorable book. And it led me to learn a little bit of history. This book was absolutely incredible. Depending on how I think about it, this was my favorite book of all time. If not my number one, undeniably in my top 3. This was the most emotionally powerful book I've ever read. It was the most beautiful book I've ever read. It was stunning. It was incredible for me. This was a 10 out of 10. No questions asked. I almost jumped straight into spoilers, but I forgot for book chats. I'm restructuring the way I do the segments. What am I reading next? Well, if you saw my last video, I spoiled it already. But we are focusing on book series again. I want to finish the Southern Reach trilogy, so I am reading Authority by Jeff Vandermeer, the second book in the Southern Reach trilogy. For my spoiler section, normally it's pretty chaotic. Normally I just kind of ramble, but I'm a little bit more organized this time. The spoiler section, I'm gonna break up into 2 parts. I think the first is just gonna be the moments that were unpredictable for me, the moments where I was surprised or just had an expectation or like a guess of what was going to happen and it was just wrong. And then the second section is going to be just me throwing out probably 4 or 5 moments in the book that stuck out to me. The first unpredictable moment for me was at Ranch Belmonte. Whenever after the events of Orvilla, when Rodrigo has Garcia Dorada's cousin executed and Garcia Dorada is pissed and goes to get vengeance on his family at their ranch, I thought that was going to be like a plot point. Well, okay, it is, but I mean like, I thought they were going to go to the ranch and commit some atrocities against Rodrigo's family, and then Rodrigo was going to have to deal with that. No, their family is just badass as hell. They completely stopped his whole charade, and what really surprised me was Rodrigo's wife executing Garcia. That, I was not expecting that whatsoever. I thought something was going to go wrong. I thought somehow maybe the kids were going to get killed or she was going to get captured. I don't know. I just did not think that was going to go well, and it did. His wife is just a bad bitch. She's just badass, man. So that was unexpected for me. So then after that, the actual constable, Gonzalez Dorada, and then Rodrigo are before the king. And the King Ramiro, has learned about all of these things that has happened. And I was certain that there was going to be some sort of like political corruption or like, you don't mess with the Doradas because they're my constable or something like that. But no, the king was cool with it. The king was like, you know, Orvilla, they pay pariahs to me, so they're under my protection, so they had no right to be butchering these people, and you stopping them was a lawful act as a soldier of my country. And then separately, Garcia going to get vengeance against your family was unfair, so your wife executing him was fine. I was not expecting that. I thought there was going to be some sort of like I said, political corruption or something like that. And it was really frustrating to know that the only thing that got Rodrigo exiled was his temper. The only thing that got him exiled was whipping Garcia in the face and scarring him, and then accusing him of regicide against King Raimundo. That's what Ramiro exiled him for, not for his actual actions. So that was crazy for me. I really thought there was going to be more political corruption involved there, but no, there wasn't. And then lastly, jumping, those bullet points were kind of more in the beginning of the book, jumping all the way to the end. I thought Amar was losing that duel. I really thought Amar ibn Khairan was going to be killed. And I mean, I know that the wording was making it seem that way, but I mean my prediction. I mean before that fight ended, I really was expecting the story to be Rodrigo besting him and Jehane lamenting and grieving his death towards the end of the book. So I was surprised to see him live. So yeah, that was surprising. I really thought Amar was losing that final duel at the end. Lastly, I'm just kind of rapid firing moments from the book that were badass or emotional or just like memorable for me to be putting them in this section of the video. The first has been mentioned, I think, twice now. I mean, it was kind of the inciting incident to get Rodrigo exiled, so it was kind of a big deal. But his language was just, the dialogue he gives was so awesome to Garcia. He says, you know, what you did as a boy on your family estates, you know, was no concern of mine. What you do here as someone who passes for a man, unfortunately, is. This village lies under the protection of the King of Valido, whose officer I am. The tax I'm here to collect was paid in part by the people you have butchered here tonight. You have taken the promise of King Ramiro and made him a liar in the eyes of the world. Given that fact, what should I do with you? Really, I mean, not really much to say to that. Just sick dialogue, just super cool. As soon as his wife executes Garcia on their ranch, she's talking to the rest of Garcia's men. She says, "The rest of you may go. Start walking. You will not be harmed. You may give report in Asterin that I have executed an oath breaker and a common brigand who threatened a Valadan woman and her children." And then her kids say, "I don't think father would have wanted you to shoot him." And she says, "Be silent. When I wish the opinions of my child, I will salute them." She's just, Miranda was a badass, man. These aren't quite as badass. They're a little more introspective, a little more deep. But one is just a really good way to word religious extremist or like strong religious devotion, but also acknowledging that we're human and that people make mistakes. I've just never heard it worded so eloquently like this. Ibarra, who is the Belmonte family cleric, he says, or well, the narrator is saying about him, he's a quiet man, somewhat old before his years, but not without a sense of humor or an awareness of how the stern precepts of the God had, at times, to be measured against an awareness of human frailty and passions. Basically saying that we can strive to be as religiously strict and perfect as we can, or like we try to be, but we should acknowledge that we're mortals, we make mistakes, we have more concrete, grounded passions and senses and such. So I don't know, I just thought that was a really eloquently way to word that. My last two moments, they're completely different moments, but I think they share the same theme of the book, that the most important things for humanity, or at least the things that can bring us happiness and fulfillment, are those in the arts and humanities and those kind of deals. And so whenever Rodrigo and Amar are kind of hitting this realization of their differences to loyalties, Rodrigo says, "What would you have me do?" And Amar says, "What would I have you do? I would have you go home, breed horses, raise your sons, love your wife. Make your country into a land that understands more than only war and righteous piety." It's really it was sad to see those loyalties divide, and Amar just kind of speaking one of the major themes of the book. And then lastly, the last little theme, ending on kind of a melancholy note here, but this occurs whenever Ragosa is being besieged by the Jadites at like the very end of the book, like 30 pages to the end of the book. The Kindath Chancellor, he's sort of looking around the room and he's looking at all of these super fancy, pretty things. He looked around, he saw the wine, and then the wine inside of the beautiful goblet itself, the white candles and their gold sconces, the tapestries, the carved ivory figures. He smelled the incense imported from Syria. And then the narrator says, in a way, Mazur bin Avrin thought all these delicate things were bulwarks, the innermost defenses of civilized man against the rain and dark and ignorance. What I took that to mean is that the king, and like the town of Ragosa, is sort of the last town of religious tolerance and one that is focused on the humanities and beautiful things in the arts. It's like saying the king has all of these beautiful things to try to distract him or make him forget about the religious extremist and the savagery and the war that's happening outside of this town. Specifically in that moment in the book happening between the Jadite kingdom and Ashar. Just furthering this theme of lamenting the darker side of humanity prevailing. If you made it to this point in the video, I've got to cheer up the tone because, man, that's really dark. If you made it to this point in the video, thanks for hanging with me. As always, I read a book excerpt at the end of every solo video I make. Something cool, something pretty, something evocative, I don't know. Let's just see what we find here. Shout out to my first book chat, here we go. Her fingers nodded in a complex pattern that drained the blood from them. A nervous gesture or an arcane prayer. Out of the Drowning Deep by A.C. Wise. Thanks for hanging with me.